Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all well and had a good Shabbos, a good Vok, Shavua Tov. Today's learning is dedicated in memory of Harav Yaakov Tzvi ben David Aryeh, Leah Bas Bible, Tziva Bas Mordechai, Avram ben David Slavin, Shlomo ben Yisrael Morris, Tzipora Feigel Bas Reuven Baruch, Shalom ben Elili, ben Bas Bible from Moshe Shana Bas Yaakov Shmuel, Yiriyahu Yechil ben Chav Moshe Eliezer, Kid Bas Henach, Sarah Malka Bas Ben Yomen, and David ben Yosef Bowman, Michal ben Yaakov HaKohen Conway, Avram ben Chanan Graham, David Bear ben Yisrael Rees, Avram ben Binyamin Levine, Frima Bas Herschel, Yitzchak Kogan, Leah Bas Avram Simons, and Leah Bas Avram Simons, and Yaakov ben Yitzchak Spring. Wish their respective families long life and only simchas. So today we continue, and we are up to the Gate of Miserliness, right? So miserliness is a base trait in most of its facets. In other words, it's something which we obviously want to stay away from. It's very difficult to think of a scenario where it would be something that the characteristic that would be something that we would want to utilize. So these are he says these are the traits of the miser. He heaps up wealth and does not give charity. He does not pity the poor. He is overly fastidious in his dealings with his fellow man, overlooking nothing. He does not feed or clothe or otherwise benefit any man for what he owns. He has no trust in him who gives his money, in other words, referring to God. He is hated by others. He does not pursue mitzvahs. He does not acquire a teacher or friend. And because of this, he remains empty of Torah and mitzvahs. So it's far more than just being careful with money. It is a whole approach to life. Sorry, just good morning to everyone, to Peter, to Eitan, to Paul, to Caroline, to Harry, to Michelle. Good morning, welcome. So what we have said is, it's where a person basically lives quite a reclusive life. They cut themselves off. They feel that they are independent, self-financing. They're only interested in self-interest, and therefore they do not share anything with anyone, and they're not interested in interacting with any person. Okay, and therefore also one's life is very much egocentric. It's all about the me, and doesn't have any trust or faith in God. Right? You believe that you have everything that you need, and therefore you don't need anyone or anything else. Good morning, David. Thank you for that message. So one who is miserly with his person is also extremely evil. That's quite strong language. For he does not do any kindness of others. And worst of all, he's one who is miserly with his wisdom or with his books, right? In other words, it's not just you don't share your money. It's about your resources, about your time, right? A person doesn't share themselves, right? So there are, just going to make sure we are charged. So we know that when it comes to the chuppah, we have a chuppah which is quite an unusual structure. We take it for granted because we've been to so many, but for non-Jews, it's quite a striking image when they come to see a chuppah. You know, this beautiful, beautiful wedding ceremony, and usually quite a beautiful setting, and yet it's quite a simple structure, 4 poles, right, and open on all sides. And the idea we know is that it symbolizes the home, the Jewish home, which is open on all sides to be welcoming. That is the exact opposite of the miser. The miser is make sure that every door and every gateway to his home and to his life remain firmly closed and locked, so that nobody can gain from him in any way. So we know that also in terms of charity, one's meant to take miser, one's meant to tithe not just one's money, but also one's resources, one's time. Moshe Feinstein writes that one has to give 1/10 of one's time to others. However busy a person is, however precious time is, you have to find time for others, to share with them, to share your life with them. And that is the exact opposite of the miser. So what is the good in this trait? What could be the possible upside of such a stinginess, selfishness? What could be any possible benefit? So he says The good in this trait is not wasting one's money on vanities, and sometimes avoiding great transgressions thereby. So, in other words, a miser does not waste. He does not live an ostentatious, lavish lifestyle, right? He doesn't, take his resources and just, burn the money. Just want to use everything up. Quite the opposite. He's very, very careful about everything that he or she has. Overly careful, but we can see that there is something to be learned from it. We find with Yaakov, Jacob, our forefather, and he actually quotes this, that Yaakov was an exceptionally generous and exceptionally wealthy person. Okay, and yet we know in the middle of the night when he was ferrying his family across the river, he went back for pachim katanim, small little jugs. Now, why did he go back for little jugs? He had so much wealth, right? He could have bought, gold jugs. Why did he need to go back? And the answer that our sages tell us is because if the Almighty has given you certain resources, certain wealth, then you have to cherish and you have to safeguard and look after it and utilize it in the right way. So you cannot just discard it, right? You cannot just dispose of what you have at your disposal. You have to make sure that you utilize it, if it's a God-given thing, in the correct way. And that is the only redeeming feature that we learn from the miser, that we should not be wasteful. We should not live a life of lavishness or ostentatiousness, but it is whatever we have to make sure that we cherish and utilize in the right way. Now, clearly the miser is off kilter. And there's an amazing story with which we'll conclude about the holy miser. You may have heard of him if you visited Krakow and you went to the cemetery there. And I'll tell you the story in brief. The story goes that there was a very wealthy man in the 17th century. He was simply known as the miser. And he, despite his wealth, he would not give a penny to anybody. He was quite not aggressive, but he was unfriendly. He kept himself to himself. He didn't want to know anyone from the community, and whenever he was approached, he would shoo people away. He died, and nobody wanted to bury him. Eventually, they buried him on the edge of the cemetery, a place which was for the outcasts. And that Friday, there was a knock at the door of the rabbi. And the rabbi answered the door, and this poor person was there and said, I didn't get my envelope today. He says, what are you talking about? He says, every Friday I get an envelope. So the rabbi takes from the resources that he has, the tzedakah fund, and gives the man some money. A few minutes later, there's another knock at the door, and another person comes, and sure enough, says the same thing. I didn't get my envelope before Shabbos. My family need the money. How am I going to manage? Rabbi takes funds. And this went on, knock after knock, hour after hour. The people beseeched the rabbi because they didn't have the funds. And the rabbi put two and two together. And then you realize what had changed was that the miser had passed away, but he wasn't just a miser. He was a holy miser, somebody who on the outside wanted to give off the impression that he didn't want to be known for being wealthy or for being known for his charitable acts, and yet secretly he was sustaining and supporting the whole town, putting envelopes through their door in the middle of the night. And therefore the rabbi, who was Rav Yom Tov Lippman Heller, who was one of the great sages of that time, he specified he wanted to be buried next to the holy miser. And they had the word tzaddik, righteous, written on the tombstone of the holy miser in Krakow. And so you'll go there and you'll see on the outside of the cemetery, you wouldn't expect the Rav of the city to be buried there, the Rav of the shul, and yet he's buried there because he felt it was a place of great holiness to be buried next to such a special man. So therefore, although he gave the impression of being a miser, he wasn't miserly in any sense of the way. Quite the opposite. He was exceptionally generous and charitable, but he did it on the quiet. He did it anonymously, right, which we mentioned before is a great and praiseworthy way to give charity. So that is where we are stopping for today. That's the gate of miserliness. And the next gate that we are going to go on to tomorrow, please God, is the gate of remembrance. Okay? Zechira, remembrance. So we continue now with Psalm 23. Lovely to see so many people still joining us. Good morning, Estelle and Richard, and everyone else who's already with us. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even when I walk in the valley of darkness, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my adversaries. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. Memorial prayer. Adon Elamim Zachor Es Nishmais. Rav Yaakov Tzvi ben David Aryeh, Rav Lord Sachs, Leah Bas Bible, Tzvi Bas Mordechai, Avram ben David Slavin, Shalom ben Yisrael Morris, Tzipora Pegel Bas Ruben Baruch, Shalom ben Eleli ben Bas Bible, Prabhu Shan Bas Yaakov Shmo, Yirmiyahu Chia ben Chav Moshe Eliezer, Kela Bela Bas Henach, Sarah Malka Bas ben Yomin, and the Yortzites, David ben Yosef, Bauman, Michal ben Yaakov Cohen, Conway, Avram ben Hanan Graham, David Bear ben Yisrael Reeves, Avram ben Binyamin Levine, Prima Bas Herschel Yitzchak Kogan, Leah Bas Avram Simons, Yaakov ben Yitzchak Spring, Shalkul Yilamam, Pegan Aiden Teimanuchas, Amlachem Balarachamim, Yatirein Besesakan Babilamim, Vesobas Haisashwasam Adina in Achlasam, Yanuch Bishlamish Venamar, Amen. Lastly, for Shlema prayer. Misha Bechabasin, Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov, Moshe Aaron, David Shlomo Baruch, Rabbi Zachailim. Babu Shana Mispalim, Babu Ram, Biz Chazakash Baruch, Yimale Rachim Alehem, Lachmula Posam, Bishlachlim, Fushlim, and Shmaim Lachol, Rainbow Shachalisa, Rufus and Nefish Pusaka, Hash Magas Makarev and Amar, Amen, Fushlema. Lastly, I'm going to leave you with a little question. There was a wonderful debate last night with David Lammy on the radio. I was listening to it, and it was about whether we should have lockdown or whether we should allow people to visit their families and basically suspend some of the COVID rules for people in this country, the population, to be able to celebrate their Christmas. And it was a fascinating debate. On the one hand, many were saying, we don't know what's tomorrow, right? How can we be away from our families? You know, if this could go on for a long time, we want to be together. And on the other hand, there was an incredible woman. She was 91, and many others that followed in her footsteps. And she said, I was 6 years away from my family, 6 years during the war, right? And I did that, and our family did that. And you make sacrifices for the good of society and for the good of the country. She says, we have made so many sacrifices over the last year. How can we throw in the towel now? How can we give in and make compromises which are going to risk the lives of so many people? And it was a fascinating discussion, and I'm interested to hear your views about it. You can write to me, or you can email me, or you can write on the chat tomorrow. But it is an interesting point of discussion. You know, we are in a Christian country after all, and they want to come together. So, you know, maybe they should. On the other hand, we gave up Rosh Hashanah. Other faiths have given up their festivals, and therefore maybe this is 1 year when everyone has to make sacrifices in areas of faith, and therefore we should not come together over the holiday period. If we were allowed to, would you be seeing your families? Would you take advantage of it, or would you say that it's better to err on the side of the caution? Interesting. So that's food for thought. Let me know your thoughts. In the meantime, have a great day. Keep safe, keep well, look after yourselves.